My husband gave the car I bought to his brother. I stopped paying the loan and walked away. The first thing I noticed when I pulled onto our street was that the spot where my car should have been was empty. Not just empty. It felt like a void, a black hole that instantly sucked all the air from my lungs. My beautiful blue Honda Civic, the one I'd spent 2 years saving for, making double shifts and overtime at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, was gone. My heart raced as I fumbled with my phone, ready to call the police. Car theft wasn't common in our quiet suburban neighborhood, but it happened. 3 deep breaths later, I pushed open our front door, already rehearsing what I'd tell the dispatcher. That's when I heard the laughter. Jake, my husband of 5 years, was sprawled on our couch, beer in hand, his feet propped on our coffee table. Next to him sat his younger brother Ethan, both of them howling at something on the TV. They didn't even look up when I entered. "Jake," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "My car is gone. I think it's been stolen." Jake finally turned to look at me, his expression casual, almost amused. There wasn't a hint of concern in his eyes. Instead, he took another swig of his beer before answering. "It's not stolen, Claire. I gave it to Ethan." The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "You what?" "I gave it to Ethan," Jake repeated, as if explaining something simple to a child. "His truck broke down last week. Transmission shot. He needed wheels more than we do. We've got 2 cars, and you can take the bus to work. It's not that big a deal." Not that big a deal. The words echoed in my head like they were bouncing around an empty cavern. 2 years of saving. 60-hour work weeks. Picking up every extra holiday shift nobody wanted. Skipping dinners out, movie nights, new clothes, all to finally have something that was truly mine. And Jake had given it away without even asking me. Ethan had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but not enough to offer to return my car. Instead, he raised his beer in a half-hearted toast. "Thanks again, man. You really saved my ass." "That's what family's for," Jake replied, clinking his bottle against his brother's. "We take care of our own." I stood there, invisible. Not family enough to be consulted, apparently. "The car's in my name," I said quietly. "The loan is in my name." Jake waved his hand dismissively. "Yeah, but we're married. What's yours is mine, right? Besides, we both know your credit score was better. That's the only reason it's in your name." That wasn't true. We got the loan in my name because Jake's credit was shot after he'd maxed out 3 credit cards buying gaming equipment and a motorcycle he later crashed. The motorcycle he'd insisted we couldn't afford to replace, which was why I needed a reliable car in the first place. "Did you at least get the title transferred?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Jake shrugged. "We'll deal with that paperwork stuff later. Ethan needed it today." Something cold settled in my stomach. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. Looking at Jake, at the man I'd promised to love and honor, I suddenly saw him clearly for perhaps the first time since we'd met in college. The charming smile that had once made my heart flutter now looked smug and entitled. The carefree attitude I'd found so attractive now seemed irresponsible and selfish. This wasn't the first time Jake had made decisions without me. There was the time he'd spent our vacation money on a fishing boat with his friends. The time he'd invited his parents to stay for a few days that turned into 3 months. The time he'd adopted a dog without discussing it, then returned it a week later when he realized how much work it was. But this was different. This was theft disguised as generosity. I should have screamed. I should have demanded my car back. I should have called the police anyway and reported it stolen, because that's what it was. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. "You're right," I said softly. "Family first." Jake's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then his face relaxed into a relieved grin. "See? I knew you'd understand once I explained." "Of course I understand," I replied, my voice honey-sweet. "Ethan needs the car more than I do." Jake turned to his brother with a triumphant expression. "Told you she'd be cool with it." Ethan, still looking slightly uncomfortable, nodded. "Thanks, Claire. I really appreciate it." I nodded back, maintaining my smile. "Don't mention it. I'm going to take a shower. It's been a long day. As I headed upstairs, I heard Jake say, "See, bro? My wife's the best." In the bathroom, I locked the door and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were calm, much calmer than I felt inside. But beneath the shock and anger, a plan was already forming. Jake thought he knew me. He thought I was predictable, accommodating Claire, who would go along with whatever he decided, who would swallow her feelings and adapt to his whims, who would keep the peace at any cost. He was wrong. I stepped into the shower and let the hot water wash over me, thinking about all the times I'd chosen harmony over justice, all the times I'd backed down to avoid conflict, all the times I'd convinced myself that marriage meant compromise, even when I was the only one compromising. Not anymore. By the time I turned off the water, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wouldn't fight with Jake. I wouldn't demand my car back. I wouldn't even tell Ethan to return it. I would do something much worse. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months, while Jake snored beside me, completely unaware that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. In his arrogance, he assumed my silence meant submission. He had no idea it meant declaration of war. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling the life we'd built together, piece by piece. Starting with that car. Jake thought he could give away what was mine? Fine. But he was about to learn a valuable lesson. What goes around comes around, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke before Jake. Soft morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I watched him sleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. He had no idea what was coming. I slipped out of bed without waking him and padded quietly to the kitchen. As the coffee brewed, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The car payment was scheduled to go through in 3 days, $386.42, just as it had been for the past 11 months. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the cancel automatic payment button. Was I really going to do this? The image of Jake and Ethan toasting each other with their beers flashed through my mind. "What's yours is mine," Jake had said. If that was true, then the reverse must also be true. What's mine is his, including the consequences of his actions. I pressed the button. A warning message popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this automatic payment? This may result in late fees or penalties." I clicked yes. Next, I dialed the bank. A cheerful customer service representative named Marcus answered after 3 rings. "Good morning, First National Bank. This is Marcus. How may I help you today?" I kept my voice low so Jake wouldn't hear from the bedroom. "Hi, Marcus. I need to stop payments on my car loan." "I can help you with that," Marcus replied. "May I have your account number and verify your identity?" After answering his security questions, I explained my situation. Not the whole truth, just enough. I no longer have possession of the vehicle. It was given away without my consent. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am." Marcus sounded genuinely concerned. "Have you filed a police report? This sounds like theft." I laughed softly. "It's complicated. Let's just say it was given to a family member without my permission." "I see." His voice became more guarded. "Well, I should warn you that stopping payments will negatively impact your credit score, and the bank will repossess the vehicle. There could be additional fees and penalties, and you'll still be responsible for the remaining balance after repossession." "I understand," I said firmly. "I still want to stop the payments." After Marcus processed my request, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The first domino had fallen. Jake shuffled into the kitchen just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. His hair was rumpled, eyes still puffy with sleep. "Morning," he yawned, reaching for a mug. "You're up early." I smiled and handed him the coffee pot. "Couldn't sleep. Thinking about how I'll get to work now." Jake had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "I can drive you until we figure something out. Or there's the bus, like I said." "The bus takes almost 2 hours each way," I pointed out mildly. "But I'll manage." He seemed relieved by my calm acceptance. "That's my girl," he said, planting a kiss on my forehead. "Always rolling with the punches." If only he knew what punch was coming. For the next 3 weeks, I maintained a perfect facade. I took the bus to work without complaint. I asked Jake for rides when necessary, always with a smile and a thank you. I even sent Ethan a text asking how he was enjoying his new car. "It's awesome," he texted back with a thumbs up emoji. "Drives like a dream. Thanks again for being so cool about this." I responded with a smiley face and nothing more. Meanwhile, I was preparing. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, one Jake didn't know about. I started diverting small portions of my paycheck into it, not enough for Jake to notice, but enough to build a safety net. I researched apartments in a neighboring town, saving listings that looked promising, and I waited for the first missed payment notice to arrive. It came exactly 15 days after I stopped the payments. A formal letter from the bank, warning about the consequences of default. I intercepted it before Jake could see it, tucking into my purse where he'd never look. The second notice came by both mail and email a week later. This time, I let Jake find the letter. He cornered me in the kitchen that evening, waving the opened envelope. "What the hell is this? Why is the bank saying we missed a car payment?" I looked up from the dinner I was preparing, my expression neutral.
"Oh, that."
"I stopped making payments last month." Jake's face flushed red. "You what? Why would you do that? Do you know what this will do to your credit score?" I shrugged, turning back to the stove. "I figured if I don't have a car, I shouldn't have to pay for one. But, Jake sputtered. "You can't just stop paying. That's not how loans work." "You're right," I agreed, stirring the pasta sauce calmly. "When you stop paying, they take the car back. That's exactly how loans work." Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by panic. "They're going to repossess the car? Ethan's car? Claire, you can't be serious." "Why not?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You gave away my car without asking. Why should I pay for something I don't have?" Jake ran his hands through his hair frantically. "Because it'll ruin your credit. Our credit. We'll never be able to buy a house at this rate." I turned to face him fully. "That sounds like a problem for you and Ethan to solve. Maybe he can take over the payments." "He can't afford the payments. That's why I gave him the car in the first place, to help him out." "So, you gave him something he couldn't afford to maintain?" I raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound very helpful to me." Jake grabbed his phone. "I'm calling Ethan. We need to figure this out." I returned to my cooking as Jake paced the kitchen, explaining the situation to his brother in increasingly agitated tones. From his side of the conversation, I gathered that Ethan was equally panicked. "No, you don't understand," Jake was saying. "They'll come and take it. Yes, they can do that. It's still in her name. No, I don't think she's bluffing." He glanced over at me, hoping to see some sign of wavering. I smiled pleasantly and continued stirring the sauce. "Look, just bring the car back here tonight, okay?" Jake finally said. "We'll figure something out." As he hung up, he turned to me with a pleading expression. "Claire, please. Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. I'll make this right." "It's too late," I replied softly. The third notice already went out. You know what comes next. And for the first time, Jake looked at me with something new in his eyes. Fear. He was finally beginning to understand that his actions had consequences. But he had no idea that this was just the beginning. Ethan brought the car back that night, parking it in our driveway with a screech of tires that announced his anger before he even slammed the car door. I watched from the kitchen window as the brothers argued in harsh whispers beside the Honda. Jake gesturing frantically, Ethan shaking his head in disbelief. When they finally came inside, Ethan couldn't even look at me. "I can't believe you'd do this," he muttered, staring at the floor. "I thought we were family." "Family consults each other before making major decisions," I replied evenly. "Family respects boundaries." Jake stepped between us, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Look, let's all calm down. I'll fix this. I'll call the bank first thing tomorrow and get everything sorted out." I smiled thinly. "Good luck with that." That night, while Jake snored beside me, I opened my laptop and created a new email account. Then I set up a profile on an online marketplace using that email. The username, QuickSellNow, revealed nothing about my identity. The next morning, after Jake left to meet with the bank, a futile mission, as I knew they wouldn't speak to him without my authorization, I took photos of his prized vintage guitar, a 1976 Fender Stratocaster he'd inherited from his uncle, worth at least $2,500. He barely played it, but he loved showing it off to visitors, telling the same stories about his uncle's band and their almost famous moments. Vintage Fender Stratocaster, $800, must sell today, I wrote in the listing description. Underpricing, it guaranteed quick interest. Within an hour, I had 15 messages. I arranged to meet the first serious buyer at a coffee shop during my lunch break. The man, a bearded musician in his 40s, examined the guitar with reverent hands. "This is worth way more than $800, he said suspiciously. "Why so cheap?" I'd prepared for this. "Divorce," I said simply. "Just want it gone." Understanding flickered in his eyes. He paid in cash, no further questions asked. I deposited the money into my new secret account and felt a rush of satisfaction more potent than anything I'd experienced in years. This was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I sold Jake's possessions systematically. His collection of limited edition sneakers that he kept in pristine condition, gone to a college student for $350. The expensive drone he'd used exactly twice, sold to a photographer for $400. His gaming console and games, purchased by a young couple for their son's birthday, $600. I was careful to choose items he wouldn't immediately notice were missing. The guitar stayed in its case in the spare room closet. He only brought it out when showing off. The sneakers remained in their boxes on the top shelf. The gaming console gathered dust since he'd upgraded to a newer model that stayed in the living room. Meanwhile, Jake was desperately trying to resolve the car situation. He'd convinced Ethan to return it, but the bank wouldn't accept late payments without substantial penalties. Jake didn't have the money, and neither did Ethan. "They're being completely unreasonable," Jake complained one evening, pacing our living room. "I told them we'd pay the missed payment plus a fee, but they're saying the loan is in collections now. They want the full balance." I made sympathetic noises while scrolling through my phone, actually messaging another buyer about Jake's gold watch. "Maybe you should sell something to raise the money," I suggested innocently. Jake snapped his fingers. "That's it. I'll sell my guitar. I never play it anyway, and it's worth a few grand at least." I kept my expression neutral. "That's a great idea. Why don't you look for it this weekend?" He nodded, already looking relieved. "See, this is why I love you. Always helping me find solutions." If only he knew. The following Saturday, when Jake went to retrieve his guitar, I was conveniently grocery shopping. My phone buzzed with his incoming call, just as I was selecting avocados. "Claire," his voice was tight, controlled panic vibrating beneath the surface. "Did you move my guitar? I can't find it anywhere." "Your guitar?" I frowned into the phone, the picture of confusion. "Isn't it in the spare room closet where it always is?" "No, it's not there. I've looked everywhere." "That's strange," I said. "When's the last time you saw it?" Jake was quiet, thinking. "I don't know, a few months ago maybe? When my college buddies were over. Maybe one of them borrowed it?" I suggested. "Without asking? No way." But doubt had crept into his voice. "Well, keep looking. I'm sure it'll turn up," I assured him. "I'll be home in an hour to help." By the time I returned, Jake had torn apart the spare room and was starting on our bedroom closet. His face was flushed, hair standing on end from running frustrated hands through it repeatedly. "It's gone," he said flatly when he saw me. "And so are my Jordan 4s and the drone. Claire, I think we've been robbed." I set down the groceries with a genuine gasp. "Robbed? Should we call the police?" Jake hesitated. "There's no sign of break-in. It's weird, only my stuff seems to be missing." "What do you mean?" "Well, your jewelry is still in your box. The TV and sound system are still here. It's just specific things of mine." I frowned thoughtfully. "That is strange. When do you think this happened?" Jake shook his head, bewildered. "I have no idea. I haven't needed any of that stuff lately." That evening, Ethan came over for their usual beer and game night. He immediately noticed the missing sound system that normally dominated our entertainment center. "Hey, where's that fancy sound system you had?" he asked, looking around the living room in confusion. Jake shrugged, still upset about his missing possessions. No idea. Seems like a bunch of my stuff has disappeared. I think someone's been stealing from us. Ethan raised his eyebrows. Stealing? Like who? You guys have a cleaning service or something? No one else has keys except us, Jake said, then glanced pointedly at me. At least, that's what I thought. I met his gaze steadily. What are you implying, Jake? He looked away first. Nothing. It's just weird, that's all. Ethan seemed uncomfortable with the tension between us. Maybe you just misplaced things? Or put them in storage and forgot? A guitar, sneakers, a drone, and now apparently my sound system? All misplaced. Jake shook his head. Something's not right. Well, file a police report, Ethan suggested. That's what insurance is for, right? Jake and I exchanged a look. We both knew we'd let our renter's insurance lapse 3 months ago. Jake's idea to save money. Yeah, Jake muttered. Maybe. As they settled in with their beers to watch the game on our now silent TV, I slipped away to the kitchen, opened my Marketplace app, and confirmed a meeting with a buyer for Jake's collection of signed baseball cards the next day. The foundation of Jake's world was crumbling beneath his feet, and he had no idea I was the earthquake causing it. 2 weeks passed in a strange domestic Cold War. Jake grew increasingly paranoid about his disappearing possessions, while I maintained my innocent facade. He started checking closets and drawers randomly, as if expecting to catch his belongings trying to escape. Twice, I caught him scrolling through online marketplaces, searching for his guitar. You really think someone stole it and is selling it online? I asked, keeping my voice casual as I peered over his shoulder. I don't know what to think anymore, he muttered. Things don't just vanish into thin air. I patted his shoulder sympathetically. Maybe we should change the locks? If you're worried someone got a key somehow? Jake brightened at the suggestion. That's a good idea. I'll do it tomorrow. Meanwhile, I had reached phase 2 of my plan. The car situation remained unresolved. The bank had scheduled a repossession, but their timing was uncertain. According to their last communication, which I'd carefully shared with Jake, they could come anytime in the next 30 days. The uncertainty was clearly eating at him. He jumped every time a truck drove past our house, fearing it was the repo men. He'd started parking the Honda in the garage instead of the driveway, as if that would somehow protect it. It was time to escalate. I waited for the perfect opportunity. A Saturday when Jake announced he was meeting Ethan and some friends to watch a game at a sports bar. I probably won't be back until late, he said, grabbing his keys. Don't wait up. I smiled. Have fun. As soon as his car pulled away, I sprang into action. I'd been preparing for weeks, scouting local buy and sell groups, researching prices, taking discreet photos. Now I posted everything at once. Moving sale. Everything must go today. Cash only. Our sectional sofa. $300. The 65-inch TV Jake had insisted we needed. $400. His collection of power tools that had been used exactly once. $250 for the set. Our dining table and chairs. $150. Every item was priced to sell immediately. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with messages. I scheduled buyers to arrive every half hour, creating a steady stream of strangers carrying our furniture and appliances out the door. By 3 o'clock, our living room was empty except for a single armchair, my reading chair that I deliberately kept off the listing. The kitchen had been stripped of everything but the essential appliances that came with the rental. Jake's man cave in the basement was now just an empty room with bare walls where his sports memorabilia had once hung. At 4:30, as a young couple drove away with our bed frame and mattress, I received a text from Jake. Game ended early. Heading home now. Want me to pick up dinner? I replied, sure. Whatever you feel like. Then I settled into my remaining armchair to wait. 20 minutes later, I heard Jake's car pull into the driveway. The front door opened, followed by a moment of complete silence. Then, what the hell? His roar echoed through our now empty house. I heard his footsteps pounding from room to room, each new discovery punctuated by another shocked exclamation. When he finally stormed into the living room and found me calmly reading in my armchair, He looked like he might explode. Claire, what happened? Where is everything? Was it a robbery? Did you call the police? The questions tumbled out in a frantic stream. I placed my bookmark carefully and closed my novel. It wasn't a robbery, Jake. His face contorted in confusion. Then what? I sold it. 2 simple words, yet they hit him like a physical blow. He actually staggered backward. You sold our furniture? Our TV? Our bed? His voice rose with each item. I nodded calmly. Yes. Why? He screamed, his face turning an alarming shade of red. I stood up, finally allowing some of my anger to show. Oh, don't worry, babe. I just figured if we're giving things away, why stop at the car? Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by disbelief, then fury. This is about the car? Are you insane? You sold our things because you're mad about the car? Not mad, I corrected. Just applying your logic consistently. You decided my car would be better with Ethan. I decided our furniture would be better with people who actually appreciate it. Jake ran his hands through his hair, turning in a wild circle as he surveyed the empty room. Where's the money? Tell me you at least kept the money. I shrugged. Of course I kept the money. Just not where you can access it. He lunged toward me then, grabbing my shoulders. You can't do this. This is our stuff, our life. I didn't flinch. Take your hands off me, Jake. Something in my voice must have warned him. He released me, stepping back. You've lost your mind, he said, shaking his head. I'm calling the police. And tell them what? That your wife sold her own furniture? I raised an eyebrow. Most of these items were bought with my money anyway. Check the receipts if you don't believe me. It was true. While Jake had contributed to our household with flashy purchases like the TV and his gaming equipment, the everyday furniture, the dining table, the sofa, most of the kitchenware, had been purchased with my nursing salary while he was between jobs or recovering from his motorcycle accident. Jake was fumbling for a response when a truck pulled up outside, its headlights sweeping across our nearly empty living room. The distinctive logo on its side was visible even through the curtains. Reliable Recovery Services. No, Jake whispered. Not now. A sharp knock at the door confirmed his fears. I believe that's for you, I said softly. Or rather, for the car. Jake flew to the window, peeking through the curtains. They can't take it. I'll move it. I'll hide it somewhere else. The GPS tracker makes that difficult, I pointed out. Besides, where would you hide it? Ethan's place? He's been getting the collection notices too, remember? They know all the likely hiding spots. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Jake looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. Claire, please. I can fix this.
Just talk to them.
It's your loan. They'll listen to you. I smiled sadly. Why would I do that, Jake? You gave my car away. Now they're taking it back. That seems fair to me. His face contorted with rage and panic. I'll never forgive you for this, he hissed. Funny, I replied. I was about to say the same thing to you. The knocking became pounding, and a stern voice called out, Reliable Recovery Services. We have authorization to repossess a 2022 Honda Civic. Jake's shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew it was over. As he trudged toward the door, I picked up my pre-packed overnight bag from beside my armchair. It was time for the final act. Jake opened the door to reveal 2 men in dark uniforms. The taller one held a clipboard, his expression professionally detached. Good evening, sir. We're here to repossess a 2022 Honda Civic, license plate JNA 4729. Our paperwork shows it's registered to Claire Harmon. Jake glanced back at me desperately, but I remained silent, shouldering my overnight bag. There's been a misunderstanding, Jake stammered. We're going to straighten out the payments. Can you give us until Monday? The repo man shook his head. I'm afraid not, sir. The vehicle is 45 days delinquent. I have a court order authorizing immediate repossession. Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then his eyes widened. It's Ethan. He's driving here now, with the car. As if on cue, we heard the growl of an engine approaching fast. Headlights swept across the front yard as Ethan screeched to a halt behind the repo truck, blocking it in. He leaped out, face flushed with anger. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, storming up the walkway. "I got your text. They can't take my car." "Sir, please lower your voice," the second repo man said, stepping forward. He was shorter but bullier, with the build of someone accustomed to physical confrontations. "This vehicle belongs to Claire Harmon according to state records, and it's being repossessed due to non-payment." Non-payment. Ethan whirled to face me. "You stopped paying on purpose?" I met his glare calmly. "I don't pay for things I don't possess." "But Jake gave it to me. It's mine now." "Not legally," the first repo man interjected, flipping through his paperwork. "There's no record of title transfer. The vehicle is still registered to Ms. Harmon, and the loan is solely in her name." A new voice joined the conversation, a woman's voice, coming from a car that had just pulled up behind Ethan's. Jake's mother emerged, her face tight with concern. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Jake called me in a panic about the house being empty and something about repossession." Perfect timing. I hadn't anticipated an audience for the final act, but I couldn't have scripted it better myself. Jake ran his hands through his hair. "Mom, not now. Not now. Your father and I are in the middle of dinner with the Petersons, and we get this hysterical call about your house being emptied and some car being taken? What have you done, Jacob?" Jake looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Meanwhile, Ethan was arguing loudly with the repo men who had started walking toward the Honda. "You can't take it," Ethan shouted. "I need that car for work. I'll lose my job. Should have thought of that before accepting property that wasn't legally given to you," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone turned to stare at me. In that moment, standing in the doorway with my bag packed and my resolve firm, I felt powerful in a way I hadn't in years. "Claire," Jake's mother began, her voice softening into the cajoling tone she always used when trying to make peace. "Sweetheart, I understand you're upset, but surely we can resolve this as a family." "No," I interrupted firmly. "We can't." Jake gave away my car without asking me. A car I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for. A car that's legally mine. So, I stopped making payments. "But your credit score," she protested, "is worth the lesson." The repo men had reached the Honda. Ethan stood in front of it, arms spread as if to physically prevent them from taking it. "Move aside, sir," the bullier one warned. "Interfering with a lawful repossession is a criminal offense." "Ethan," Jake called, his voice strained. "Just let them take it. We'll figure something out." "Figure what out?" Ethan exploded. "I have a shift in 3 hours. I need this car." "You should have thought of that before taking what wasn't yours to take," I said, walking down the front steps. Ethan rounded on me, his face contorted with rage. "You ruined me. This is all your fault." "No," I replied calmly. "This is what consequences look like." Something neither of you brothers seem familiar with. Jake stepped between us, sensing Ethan's building fury. "Ethan, back off. This isn't helping." "Helping? Nothing's going to help now. My boss already gave me a final warning about being late. Without a car, I'm done. Perhaps you should have considered the risks before accepting a car you knew wasn't legally yours," I suggested, my tone deliberately reasonable. Jake's mother gasped. "Claire, that's a terrible thing to say." "Is it? What would you call giving away someone else's property without their permission?" She had no answer for that. The repo men were now attaching chains to the Honda's front bumper. Ethan had given up his physical blockade, but was still pleading with them, offering money he didn't have, promises he couldn't keep. Jake turned to me, desperation in his eyes. "Please, Claire, stop this. Call the bank. We can still fix this." I shook my head. "It's too late. The repossession is already processed. Then we'll get it back. I'll pay whatever penalty they want." "With what money, Jake? You don't have a job. Ethan can barely make rent. And I smiled slightly. "I don't want to." Jake's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I screwed up. I know that now. I should never have given away your car without asking. I'm sorry, truly sorry." 5 weeks ago, those words might have meant something. But standing there, watching the repo men winch my Honda onto their truck, I felt nothing but vindication. "You're not sorry you did it," I said quietly. "You're sorry it backfired." I walked past him, past his gaping mother, past Ethan, who was now sitting on the curb with his head in his hands. The repo truck began pulling away with my car, and I felt a strange sense of closure watching it go. Jake followed me to the sidewalk. "Where are you going?" "Away from here." I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. "Away from you." "But all our things, our furniture. Where did the money go? What am I supposed to do now?" I turned to face him one last time. "I don't know, Jake. Maybe ask your brother for help? Isn't that what family's for?" The Uber I'd called earlier pulled up to the curb. I opened the door, then paused to deliver my final words. "By the way, I've withdrawn my half of our savings account. Don't worry, I left exactly 50%, down to the penny. I believe in fairness, after all." His face went pale. "Claire, please." "Goodbye, Jake. I hope the next woman you marry has less backbone." As the Uber pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Jake in the rearview mirror, standing alone on the sidewalk in front of our half-empty house, his mother wringing her hands beside him, Ethan still seated on the curb in defeat. It was, without a doubt, the sweetest sight I'd ever seen. The Uber dropped me at a modest hotel 10 miles from what had been my home. I'd booked the room a week earlier, another piece of my carefully orchestrated exit strategy. As I settled onto the surprisingly comfortable bed, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd just done. I had walked away from 5 years of marriage, left behind the home I'd helped build, cut ties with the man I'd once loved enough to promise forever to. And I didn't regret it for a second. My phone buzzed incessantly that night, calls and texts from Jake, from his mother, even from Ethan. I silenced it and ordered room service instead, a glass of expensive champagne and chocolate cake, a celebration of my liberation. In the morning, I went apartment hunting. I'd researched listings in a town 20 minutes away, close enough to keep my nursing job, far enough that I wouldn't accidentally run into Jake or his family. The third place I toured, a bright one-bedroom with a tiny balcony overlooking a park, felt right immediately. "I'll take it," I told the property manager. When she asked for proof of income and references, I was ready with my documentation. I'd been preparing this escape for weeks. "You can move in next Monday," she said, handing me the lease. I signed my name with a flourish, Claire Harmon, not Claire Weston. My professional name had remained unchanged through my marriage, a small act of independence that Jake had initially protested, but eventually accepted. Now I was grateful for that boundary I'd maintained. Jake's calls continued for the next 3 days, growing increasingly desperate. I listened to exactly one voicemail. "Claire, please. Everything's falling apart. Ethan lost his job. The landlord is furious about the furniture. I don't even have a bed to sleep on. We need to talk. I know I messed up, but this isn't fair. Call me back. Please." I deleted it without remorse. Fair? He wanted to talk about fair now? On the 4th day, I consulted with a lawyer about divorce proceedings. The meeting was surprisingly straightforward. No children, minimal shared assets, and a mountain of evidence showing Jake's financial irresponsibility. The lawyer assured me it could be relatively simple, especially if Jake didn't contest it. Given the circumstances, she said with a knowing smile, he may not be in a position to fight much. She was right. When Jake was served with divorce papers the following week, his response was a single text. "Is this really what you want?" I replied with one word, "Yes." He didn't contest anything after that. The weekend before moving into my new apartment, I went shopping with the money from the furniture sales and my half of our savings. I bought only what I needed: a comfortable bed, a small dining table with 2 chairs, a couch, basic kitchen supplies. Nothing extravagant, nothing showy, just the essentials for my new beginning. Then I visited a car dealership. "I'm looking for something reliable," I told the salesman. "Something that's entirely mine." I left with a used Subaru, 5 years old, with reasonable mileage and an excellent service history. I paid cash, signed my name on the title, and felt a surge of satisfaction as I slid behind the wheel. This car would never be given away without my permission. Moving day arrived with a sense of rightness. I hired movers to transport my few new possessions to the apartment, supervising as they arranged everything exactly as I wanted. By evening, I stood in my new living room, everything in its place, nothing bearing the fingerprints of my past life with Jake. I was unpacking my kitchen items when my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Claire, it's Maggie, Jake's mom. Please don't block me. I just wanted to say I understand why you left. What Jake did was wrong. I raised him better than that."
I'm sorry.
I stared at the message, surprised by the unexpected ally. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Thank you, Maggie. I hope you're well." Simple, polite, final. I had no interest in maintaining relationships with Jake's family, even those who claimed to take my side. A week later, while settling into my new routine, work at the hospital, quiet evenings in my apartment, weekend explorations of my new neighborhood, I received a certified letter. Inside was documentation from the bank confirming that the car loan had been paid in full, the default removed from my credit report, and the repossession erased from my record. Attached was a handwritten note. I took out a personal loan to fix this. It was the least I could do. "I'm sorry for everything, Jake." It was his first genuine act of accountability. Too little, too late, but I appreciated the gesture nonetheless. It made the divorce proceedings smoother when I didn't fight his request to keep his retirement account intact. Some friends called me cold when I shared my story. Others called me a hero. Neither label felt right. I wasn't heartless. I had simply reached my limit. And I wasn't brave. I had simply recognized my own worth. 3 months after moving into my apartment, I received a final text from Jake. "I miss you. I know I messed up everything, but I've changed. I'm in therapy now, working a steady job. Could we talk? Just coffee? Please, let's talk." I stared at the message for a long time, memories of our early days flickering through my mind. Jake's charming smile, his adventurous spirit, the way he used to make me laugh. For a brief moment, I wondered what it would be like to see him again. Then I remembered the casual dismissal in his voice when he told me he'd given away my car. The entitled assumption that what was mine was his to dispose of. The complete lack of respect for my boundaries, my work, my independence. I blocked his number. I don't deal with thieves. That evening, I took my Subaru for a drive along the coast, windows down, music playing. The setting sun painted the ocean in brilliant oranges and pinks as I followed the winding shoreline road. At a scenic overlook, I parked and watched the final rays disappear beneath the horizon. My phone remained silent in my pocket, no desperate texts, no pleading calls, no drama demanding my attention. Just peaceful silence. I smiled, feeling the ocean breeze on my face. Some people might call what I did revenge. I called it reclaiming my life. And as I drove home to my small, peaceful apartment, filled with things that were mine alone, I couldn't help but think, freedom never felt so good.